Hi, 3DMJers. This is Andrea Valdez, and you are listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. Before we dive in today, I just wanted to remind you guys that we have recently created a video library of educational materials at 3dmjvault.com. The Vault is a place we can organize our best information, pair it with some of our favorite resources, and share it with all of you in one online database. A lot of it is free. Some of it is for purchase to help support this podcast, and we'll continue adding pieces of updated content to it every few weeks for the rest of the year. Once again, that's 3dmjvault.com, and we really hope you like it. Today I'm talking to Eric Helms and Alberto Nunez discussing where this whole IIFYM thing meets reality. This isn't about how to diet or which diet is right for you, but it's more a nutritional history/philosophy discussion amongst friends. We talk about where the whole if it fits your macros trend came from, the great things it did for a lot of people, but the enormous confusion and misguided eating strategies it accidentally brought about. We also get into how IIFYM is not necessarily the same thing as flexible dieting. We bring intuitive eating into the conversation and a whole lot more. So we hope you guys enjoyed this, and we hope it clears the air for a lot of people who label themselves as certain types of dieters, and maybe presents a few different ways of thinking about nutritional habits and behaviors for both athletes and coaches alike. As usual, if you have any feedback or comments on this particular episode, head over to 3dmusclejourney.com and leave it under podcast number 62. Here is IIFYM Meets Reality with Alberto Nunez and Eric Helms. Eric.
Do you want to lead us in?
Eric, no, I want
you want me to lead us in?
I want you to tell me a huge problem you have with nutrition right now.
Oh man, I have such a huge problem with nutrition right now.
I know. In general, within the field of nutrition,
that's my problem. I'm hungry. That's
Bert's
my problem
hungry.
with nutrition. Yeah.
Eric gives this really good talk about what is it? IIFYM. No, it's not called that, but IIFYM Meets Reality. The one that you've done at both of our last 3DMJ seminars.
Oh yeah, just the realities of flexible dieting and how flexible dieting is not fit your macros.
Really? Do tell. How are they different?
Well, did you know that? Yeah, I think it's become the colloquial term that if someone says flexible dieting, what they mean is I don't eat from a list of foods. I hit 3 numbers on a day-to-day basis, and that actually is completely separate from whether or not your diet's flexible, which came from basically personality testing and finding that people who had a approach to dietary restraint that included flexibility and the ability to consider what previous meals, how they relate to their next meal, or previous days relate to this day, and had more of a big picture, not black and white perspective, tended to be able to, they were lighter, they had a healthy relationship with food, healthy relationship with their body, and tended to actually have lost weight and keep it off versus the opposite of all that. People who had a rigid mindset, who looked at it very black and white. These are good foods, these are bad foods, I'm either on my diet or off my diet. And I think if I had what is my huge issue with nutrition, it's that people don't realize how onerous it is and how hard it is to actually try to base your lifestyle around 3 numbers. That's not normal. And if someone doesn't actually have a lot of experience in education with nutrition and hasn't done that for a while, they have no idea what that means in terms of what do I eat, and it's not sustainable.
Right.
So I too often I think people will go like, right, get a MyFitnessPal account, get a digital food scale, get a body weight scale, and just hit these numbers and your life will be solved. And I think that's not necessarily new information. Like, it hasn't solved the obesity epidemic, it hasn't fixed people's lives,
Yeah, but people feel like it's this big revelation, right? Because typically they came from even what seemingly stricter, right? And is that a word? Or is it more strict? Anybody know the answer?
Well, I don't think anyone's gonna arrest you on this podcast. I think you're good either way.
Okay. So listeners, y'all just forget I said that. But it feels like I have these 3 things rather than maybe this one meal plan, right? Or these certain foods. So I guess we have to look at it on that scale, right? If there's restraint in the most extreme way, it would be certain foods making up this certain plan, and if you deviate from that, you're wrong and you fucked up, and you're never going to look the way you want to look or feel the way you want to feel, right? So that's unfortunately where a lot of us came from.
Oh yeah, I think that's very common in bodybuilding.
Yeah, and so then somewhere in the middle we have this IFYM, which feels like, oh my God, I have all this freedom because there's these 3 numbers versus this one thing, and I can play with them. But somehow we forget that if you still, or not we forget, but a lot of people feel like, but if we're more than 10 grams off, then we still failed, and we're still terrible, and we're still not going to look the way we want to look. And then there's, in a lot of bodybuilders and heads, then there's the other thing where like you just kind of eat freely and by feel, and some people who aren't there yet feel like that is you don't care and you're not being an athlete and you don't know what you're doing and you don't know what's really going on, and so therefore you're also never going to look the way you want to look or feel the way you want to feel, right? Those are 3 extremes. But
word. Yeah, I think you hit on a couple of really good things there. One, quote unquote flexibility is all based on your perspective and your starting point. Like if you go to someone who doesn't even know what a protein, carbohydrate, or fat is, and you tell them, "Oh, just track these 3 numbers all the time, it's easy," they'll be like, "What are you talking about?" And then you go, "Oh, well, let me explain to you what protein, carbohydrates, and fat are. Oh, let me explain to you what calories are. Oh, look at the back of your nutrition label. Now all you have to do is just everything you eat, always, just track those numbers. Oh, and you don't know how to count portion size, so you got to weigh it out. You probably shouldn't go out to eat, and then you just weigh yourself every day, and you get an average of that weight, and then you just reduce calories by 100 or by carbs by 25 grams. Same thing, by the way. And then you just do that until you get to the body weight you want. Simple. And they'll look at you like you're out of your fucking gourd, because that's like a complete change to someone's lifestyle, and it carries so many assumptions about their level of knowledge with nutrition that I think it's often not. It's not a useful message.
Yeah. Should we maybe talk about should we talk about it in terms of like, okay, for somebody new, for somebody in the thick of it, for someone advanced and knows all these skills? Or, because I think the problem, and I'm just like throwing this out there, is I gave 3 like very different things. The one in the middle, I think, is around where the whole IFYM, I just discovered how to count macros, blah, blah, is where a lot of the people in our industry exist, right? So they're not quite to like, oh shit, you can just eat and grow, but they're also past where they used to be with the meal plan, so they feel like they're so damn smart, and now they're fitness professionals. And I think that that's where we do more harm than good, right? Because now we're professionals in charge of Gen Pop, and we're telling them to be like us, but we don't know we're crazy because we're not on the other side yet.
That's accurate.
Okay.
And I also don't want to put, quote unquote, if it fits your macros, into one very limited box and paint it negatively, or to also not acknowledge the positives of it. Like if that was your ability to learn, oh my God, I can actually eat more than 8 foods, and I can work in a lot of foods I didn't used to eat, that's a very positive aspect of it, and that's fantastic. But it brings with it its own host of issues, like before we started recording, Berto talking about what he sees on some Instagram profiles, and so I think it's not just bad, but I think the culture of if it fits your macros has created new problems that probably we didn't see coming when we first started promoting this kind of approach.
Okay, let's talk about those problems. The problems that this... Go ahead, Bert.
I think before we get into that, we kind of have to really make it clear what the end goal is. Like, where is it that you want to go through your adventures in nutrition? Based on, like, when you started to do these small little changes to your diet in order to control your body composition, to have more control of your results in the gym. It was all in an effort to control something, right? And then the system just becomes more and more complex, and that's not how it should be, not over time. I think over time what you start to do is you start to throw away a lot of the excessive rules that don't really help all that much, if at all. And that's exactly what, say, IFYM did for me. Like, for example, I was able to stop eating 7 times a day, right? And I was able to eat more than my 12 foods that were always in rotation. But now at this point, like my goal is like I guess they're even more advanced, but the way that I want to get there is a bit simpler. So I think the end goal is intuitive eating to a certain extent, and when it's appropriate. Would you guys agree with that?
Right. Well, I think Eric's talked about this before. Like the end goal, or I think the way you put it, I like is that. Never mind. So she's okay. Is that you should be as flexible as required to stay en route to your goals, but know when to tighten that up when you get off track. Right? You can say it way better than me. There you go.
Me or Berta?
You, Eric, because I'm quoting. I'm trying to quote you, but it's not working.
Oh, I didn't know that. I couldn't know what you're talking about. But yeah.
As consistent.
I said that.
No. It's I'm just saying because it's in the book we wrote
that
together.
Part when you said that's what she said, I have definitely said that.
No, but
no, totally. The goal is to become as flexible as possible while still ticking all the boxes for what will optimize your approach towards your goals. That's one way to put it. Also, interesting thing about I've been staying away from the term intuitive eating because I think it doesn't tell someone what's really going on. I actually like habituation, right? So you have habituated eating for your goals. When something's a habit, you don't think about it. You don't have to do it. Like every day, I don't go, fuck, I got to brush my teeth again. That's just something I've been doing for my life, and all the little things that we should do that are good for us, that are habituated, they're not natural. Like if I came out of the womb and had never been raised by wolves, I wouldn't be brushing my teeth, But and obviously, if people eat instinctively, the obesity epidemic is a product of that in our modern environment, right? So that's not the goal. The goal should be, like Berto said, you start out with these really excessive rules. You don't know the difference between what's needed and what's just bullshit in some cases, and then you figure out what is needed, and then over time that should become automatic, or as much of it becomes automatic as possible. Because I do think that there's a time and a place for, like habituated eating, and I don't think it's during like the tail end of a contest prep, because that's just, you can't trust your signals then. As you say, Andrea, you have to drift into a mentally unhealthy place to reach a physical extreme goal, and that's not going to happen from your kind of baseline habituation eating as a bodybuilder, your kind of lifestyle bodybuilder eating. Like when you make the decision to not get the dessert and the appetizer, or you make the decision to get the high protein option at dinner, you can't just do that and wake up and be like, oh shit, I'm shredded. That actually takes substantially more effort, and you have to be pretty meticulous. And as much shit as we're kind of talking about the downfalls of if it fits your macros or the misapplication of it, all of our clients who are competing have macro targets.
Because they have to be. Well, that's what I'm saying. Right. It's not that when we're talking end goal, I don't think it's hard, right? Because I would say that 3 years ago, while the end goal was still be a good off-season bodybuilder, I wasn't not tracking at all would not have been good for me mentally. Mm. So while I think I might have been logically equipped, I wasn't in a place where I would be at peace with that. Or if I wasn't tracking, it would cause me stress. Yeah. And what's it called? I talked to Ian about that a lot on our podcast. Because he still tracks every day. He's never even competed. He tracks every day for years. But he also has that personality trait to where he nerds out on that data and he likes it, right? And I know we've all been there, but it's only the end goal in off season as a very experienced dieter, and usually someone who's been rigid for a really long time previous. Right?
Yeah, I think, totally. As much shit as we've been talking about some of the downsides of if it fits your macros, and how I said if it fits your macros and flexible dieting aren't the same thing, that doesn't mean you can't be tracking your macros and have that fall under the description of what would be a flexible diet. If you are mentally and physically healthy, it's not limiting your life, you're able to maintain good relationships and you're happy, awesome. It just also means that you can also be someone who's tracking your macros and following if it fits your macros and be very rigid about it and never eat out, hit everything with to the gram, have that be a point of stress if you're ever shifted out of that pattern and have it affect your relationships. I think that those are both possible.
It's funny. I've been like equally, I guess, limited by both types of diets at some point, whether it was like the bro diet or the IFYM diet. Like I've been in similar positions, but for some reason when I was like macronating hardcore, I thought that was better because I could go home and have ice cream with Cookie Crisp.
Yeah, I think the end goal...
It's limited, but I can eat crap, so it's great.
Well, I think too when we talk end goals, I think maybe it wouldn't be correct to even put an end goal. The same as there's not an end goal with training, right? It's like it's always going to change, right? So,
see, but a good system gives you the tools to make the right decisions based on, what is happening now, whether it be your training, are you prepping, are you like 3 years into an off season, right?
Yeah, the tool has to fit the tool in the system has to fit the circumstance, right?
Yeah.
So, Berto, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
No.
Let's say a friend who's not a competitive bodybuilder and has no desire to be a strength athlete or anything like that, but they'd be serious about it. They'd say, hey, what are some starting points that you'd give me to improve my diet and maybe to lose some body fat and get to a healthier body weight? Would you start with, all right, so here's the 3 macros? Or would you tell them something else?
I think, of course, I'd see what they're doing now currently and what their current system looks like. Just based on what I see.
Let's say they got no system.
Okay, they have no system, which I do see a lot with powerlifters. It's kind of
blank slate. This person probably doesn't know. Just assume like a low standard level of nutritional knowledge. How would you approach that to start?
We base it around a high protein diet. It'd be a small step like that. Like, hey, let's have some protein 3 times a day, and if you're good with that and you've been keeping up with that, and you want more, then hey, let's step it up to 4 and maybe try to distribute it a bit more evenly. And I'd wait a while before I even get to the point where we're going through calories. And then eventually it's like, okay, so now what we can do is we're doing a great job with the protein, but it would be in increments. And I think it's funny, the main reason is because that is how it worked out for me. That's how I ended up being, whether it be a bro staying up until like midnight, even though he wanted to go to sleep at 10 to get his last protein feeding, or that macronator that just had mild anxiety when he ate out. How I got to these really complex places, it all started with like little increments, little things that I was adding on to, I guess, make myself progress even further. And I think with this person, I would take the same route, but I'd get rid of a lot of the junky stuff that he does not need to worry about yet. But yeah, it probably would be in that order.
And see, I didn't know exactly what you say, but I knew the category of what you'd say, which is why I asked that question. So thank you. The difference between if it fits your macros and the way you're introduced to it versus the way you give someone practical, real-world nutrition advice is that, one, you tell them about theory and numbers and math, basically. And the other one, you go, right, so here's what you're going to eat. Or here's how you're going to change. One is about changing behavior. What you just described, regardless of what you ended up saying, you were describing behavior change and behavior modification and a stepwise process of changing habits and the way you do things. When someone who doesn't understand that that's the way the real world works and they talk about macronutrients, they start with myth busting or math. They go, you don't need to eat these 10 foods. Guess what? Calories in and out matters. So then here are the macronutrients, you need to track them. But they don't actually tell you how to do anything. There's a difference between behavior and knowledge. And starting with knowledge is typically not actionable. And it kind of just delays their ability to get into it. I think you need to give them only enough knowledge to understand some core tenets. If I'd asked myself that same question, I would explain to them, well, in the end, we're going to have to eat less total energy. So here are some useful ways to do that. Maybe we get protein every meal, like you said, or maybe we, eat out less. Like, you give them something actionable. And I think that's where the typical way that If It Fits Your Macros is talked about or given to people for the first time completely misses the mark. Is that it assumes a certain level of knowledge, and if you don't, then it's given in a way overtly complex manner, or in a way that's not actionable to someone unless they have experience dieting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and what sucks is all the information is like numerical. Like when you
Mm-hmm.
say they only need to know this much, but I think because we're humans in the internet age, if Bert says, I need you to eat a little protein, that person's going to go Google protein, look on Instagram for how much protein everyone eats. All the hot people eat this much protein, that's how much, you know what I mean? And so that's when it gets kind of like that mind fuck, because no one's in a bubble. So they'll hear
Mm-hmm.
one piece of advice and they get a little curious, then they'll go do all this other crazy shit. I know I did. Like, I literally was like, Ava Cowan eats that much. She's a figure pro. I just lifted weights for like 6 months. I should eat what she eats. Like, that's literally what I did. Like, and all of it within like a week. I found out who she was. I liked how she looked. She was a little taller than me. And okay, she eats these. What are macros? So then I go to Biome.com. I watch some videos by Lane. I get this app in my phone. Actually, no, I wrote it down at that time. I didn't have the app yet. I would write it. And then I made an Excel spreadsheet. Here's all the proteins. Like, it was like a week-long obsession. And then, like, gradually, over the next 3 years, just lost all my friends and relationships and social life. But that's where it started, was like, I got one little nugget, and because I'm just a curious person like that, even though I could have maybe just followed one piece of advice and see how that went, it's the dive in. And maybe you don't dive in as far as I did, but there wasn't Instagram then, there wasn't Facebook, so it's like, it's you almost never have that scenario where someone's at the gym and just asks you what they should do right now, because they have so much damn information everywhere.
Well, I'm gonna float a hypothesis to you guys, and you let me know if you think I'm on target.
Okay.
Because I agree. I think the reason why there's this disconnect, and it's not just with this, but with a lot of things in the, I would say, kind of the evidence-based fitness community, is because many of the leaders and many of the culture of the evidence-based community is not about, let's sit down and think about the best system or approach to help people. It's a response to the non-evidence-based community. It's, these are 10 myths. It's, you don't have to eat these 10 things. It's telling people what they don't have to do. It's busting myths. Mm-hmm. Like, even the acronym itself, If It Fits Your Macros, came about on forums where you were telling people who were like, oh, you can't eat that. And you're like, yes, I can, if it fits my macros. And they got tired of saying it and going, IFYM. Or answering the question, can I eat this? And it's like, if it fits your macros. It wasn't generated as, let's think about a system that has, utility, and it's based on evidence and makes sense as a step-by-step process to get someone to learn how to eat better. It's not that. It was just this kind of response to clean eating. So I think it's very common that when you generate a culture or a I'm going to loosely call it a system, but I think it's being generous, base a system off of countering something else, that it's not going to be based on utility. It's going to be based on correcting someone intellectually or just being factual, So that's my hypothesis. I don't know if you guys agree with that.
I totally agree with that, but I don't know if it's their quote unquote fault, because maybe their goal wasn't
evidence-based
community. I don't know. I just think there's a lot of people that have become famous and well known whose goal wasn't to help newbies. Like, that's not their goal. Like, there's a lot of people that are like, okay, I'm an academic. I would like to share my research. It is very data driven. It's very numerical. It's very blah, blah, blah. And just because some Gen Pop person who wants to be jacked and just found out how to lift starts following my stuff, that doesn't mean that I meant that. That's not how I would treat them, if that's does that make sense? You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. It may be that someone who is, I could be viewed as someone who primarily does myth busting. That's just the interactions they end up having because people misunderstand their purpose. But really, they just want to be fitness nerds. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right. Because I don't. Go ahead.
I think we're heavy on critiques of bad ideas, but light on generation of useful systems. in
Yeah.
in our fitness industry.
I
Like
agree.
you can find out what not to do real quick. Like,
Yep.
oh, okay, I can eat after 6 p.m. Oh, I don't need to do fasted cardio. Oh, I don't need to eat 2 grams per pound of protein. Oh, ketogenic diet isn't better than that. Like you can find out all these things, and then you're left with what? I don't
More
know.
shit not to do. Yeah.
Calories in, calories out, bro. Like that's not actually a system. Like, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I guess then too is, like I said, I feel bad shitting on that community because, and I've written an article, or we've talked about it a lot, and I've written some shit on my blog about how it is. There's that disconnect. There's the elite academics, and then there's the people in the middle that are so quick, like you said, to spread this message of like, look at all this freedom you can have, blah blah blah. But they don't actually know like why that is, and they actually are themselves living in a prison and don't realize it's not how most people's real lives work. And all the people that looked up to them are the Gen Pops that shouldn't be doing any of that shit, you know. And there's no one in the middle like to disseminate that the way you just did, Eric. And so, I guess that's a big philosophical industry-wide problem that we can't really solve on this podcast. But I guess it's important that we let people be, that we talk about it, that people recognize that while we say the best, or like how Alberto said, the end goal is to really be able to eat as an adult and be moving towards our goals when we're not in a dieting phase, right? But I think more times than not, that follows many years of being more strict. And so it's not that we're saying being strict is bad, but unfortunately, when you get to that point of it being so strict and then you get like just a smidge out of it, you're like, oh shit, I discovered the newest thing and everyone should know about it. When it's like, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, and then the
Right. Not
application,
wrong.
that's where the biggest disconnect is, I feel.
Mhm.
Is that we have all these great ideas, we know how things work, but how do you ease people like into a system that fits them? And to me, that's actual flexible dieting. Like it should be the other way around. It shouldn't be like you have like these 4 doors, pick one. We need to make something that fits you, and that's something that my diet has done more and more over time. And it's funny because if I were to tell like if I were to talk to myself of 10 years ago and I told them what I'm doing, like right now, prepping or in the off season, like dude would be so blown away by how much we've been able to simplify things, but still make really good progress. Because to me, that was the biggest thing when I decided, hey, I want to be a bodybuilder. Was like, holy shit, like nutrition matters. Like I was totally bummed out about that. I just wanted to train. And, you know, it used to be just like go to the gym 3 or 4 times a week. And then all these other things started to actually, that I had to do in order to get better, started to affect my life. And I think not finally, but a few years ago, I finally got to the point where I'm like, wow, like I've been able to do basically what it takes to get better and cut out all the extra stuff that is either overwhelming to me. And I do have things, even still, like now as an athlete, there's just certain things that overwhelm me and stress me, and just like Andrea, like your version of tracking a few years back, like if I track in the off season, it starts to stress me out like really quickly. Shoot, and it's pretty crazy. Even in the beginning of this prep, like tracking was stressing me out. So I decided, hey, I can lose 10 pounds without tracking, and I'll do a pretty good job of it. And that's how we got things rolling. Obviously, that's not the case no more, but yeah.
Bert, do us a favor and get your hair out of that microphone. Thanks. Okay.
Go.
I'm going to leave that in too. I'm not going to tell Brandon that. That's what Eric was trying to hand signal to you. Just,
I'm like,
he
I
was
don't know
like,
his real name.
we're like, does Eric have a fly in the room? No. So Jacob from JPS Fitness, I remember it sparked my brain because he made this graphic off of the pyramids, right? Where he's like, okay,
Actually,
how to
that
start
was,
flexible dieting. Your
It
presentation.
wasn't off the pyramids. It was from the presentation.
Yeah.
So I don't have that something I'm going to add to the pyramids, but it's not in there at the moment.
Right. Okay, so the way he has it here, and we can elaborate on it, and again, he says it's based off of Yeah, your presentation. Okay, step 1, dietary awareness. So education, habit and behavior, food journal. Step 2, rigid dietary constraints. So match foods to macros, self-created meal plans. Step 3, flexible dietary constraint. Freely eating by numbers, food viewed as macros, tracking calories / macros. And then step 4, adaptive intuitive eating, which is he lists hunger and satiety cues, ingrained behaviors, autoregulation of intake, and regular self-check. That's beautiful, dude. Congrats to
Yeah,
both
I
y'all.
really like that because yeah, shout out to Jacob. He took basically what I presented at the in what
Melbourne.
like over an hour in Melbourne and put it into an infographic, which got to the heart of it really well. So
Yeah.
that's hard to do. So props.
But I think what's good is the part where people get confused is there's awareness, there's rigid constraint before flexible constraint. And when you try to get people to that flexible #IFYM shit too early, it is way bigger of a deal, right? It can have so many pieces to it to learn, right?
So many variables.
Like you listed at the
Yeah.
beginning, like you have to weigh, you can't eat out, you have to, so you're assuming that they know animals are protein, you're assuming that they know which low carb vegetables can keep them full, like shit like that. You're making a whole shit ton of assumptions before they know how to use them.
There was a powerlifter I remember who worked with, who was working with us, and I won't say which coach, and this just because I don't want to like make this person feel bad or anything like that. It's an understandable mistake, and probably a little bit of an assumption on our end, but he was tracking grams of protein as the actual gram weight of foods that were protein containing.
Oh my Lord.
So if he ate like a 200 gram piece of chicken, that was 200 grams of protein. So you can imagine what happened. Ended up eating like 600 calories a day,
Wow.
So lost weight really fast. But so that's the kind of thing that can happen. Like if you have a basic understanding of nutrition, there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's normal.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, protein. Like meats. Like you think immediately when you say protein to someone who's not a macronator, they're gonna like think of the foods that contain those things predominantly. And then, so unless you're actually eating like sugar and oil and like hydrolyzed whey protein, that wouldn't work,
Yeah.
Like the grams aren't going to match up to the weight of the food versus the actual nutritional content.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
Depending on where you started. And so this 4-step process, again, I was talking about, that's in my mind, this is an actual system that I came up with, and it's not perfect, but I think it makes sense, and I've used it pretty successfully with clients. And a lot of the time, though, we get people who are ready to be at step 2 or 3, when they come to us as 3DMJ. But basically, the idea is you start at step 1, which is, I'm not going to try to alter your diet. I just want you to track it.
Right.
Get a MyFitnessPal account. Learn how to use MyFitnessPal. Learn how to use a food scale. Learn what it's like to weigh in. Trying to incorporate the idea that it doesn't actually matter what I weigh in on Wednesday. That I have to weigh in at the same times. Just making those simple things habits is a big step.
Yeah.
Learning to actually cross-reference what's in MyFitnessPal with the food label or the FDA stuff that you could just Google to make sure it wasn't some user error being entered. Making sure that they actually entered all the things in it, like protein, carbs, and fat, and calories, and being able to, like the basic questions you always see, like, why do my macros not match my calories if it's 449? Like, all those little things that that people struggle with for like 6 months sometimes would be happening at the same time as trying to actually learn what the macro contents of food are and modify your diet. And I think that's a lot to ask.
Yeah.
So why don't you just start with having someone track? And that gives you a lot of useful information as a practitioner. Like if you have someone track, and as it often happens, they start to lose weight, that means they're doing a lot of mindless eating. And once they're actually paying attention to it, their eating behavior changes.
Yeah.
If they don't lose weight, that probably means they're just eating a lot of really calorie-dense foods that's highly palatable, and they don't see anything wrong with that. They don't think, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that, and that's why they're gaining weight. So it gives you information, gives you baseline data. That's what we use it for with our clients. And then at phase 2, that's when I go, right, so you've tracked for a while. Now I want you to actually write yourself like 3 meal plans. Notice that writing yourself the meal plans, because then you actually have to figure out the math and figure out what foods represent what values. Look at what you have in your pantry, and also try to preserve the food you like. And if you write it, it'll be something you'll actually do. And once you've gone through those two phases and integrated all those behaviors and learning, that's when you can go to where most people try to jump in with it if it fits your macros, which is just, I don't have a meal plan. I just have these numbers and I'm going to eat whatever I want to fit them. But that is it's a big ask. It's a big ask to start there.
Yeah. That's what I, in my 12 questions thing or whatever, when he said, I was asked, what's the one thing that new people should do or whatever. And that's my main thing, as y'all know, with everything in life is you just need a journal. You just need to track it. Even if you don't have MyFitnessPal, but write down your food in a notebook every day before you go to bed, everything I ate today or whatever. But I'm so big on that. And not only is it a way to learn and all the great things that you said, but I find more often than not, if someone is general population and they say they're interested in losing weight, which is typical, and then you say, okay, go ahead and start tracking your food and we'll check it out in a couple weeks. Half the time they won't do that, and therefore that was just, today I felt like talking about losing weight. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's really easy that if you can't commit to a notebook for 7 days, then you're not going to lose weight, so there's no point in you asking your friend how many macros you should eat because you're not going to do anything. I just think it's a good mental checkpoint of maybe I'm not ready to make a change in my life, and that's okay.
Yeah, it gives you the opportunity to assess whether your action matches your goals yet.
Yeah.
And I'm not shaming people who aren't there.
Yeah,
it's very normal.
Neither am I. It's just a waste of
when I work with
mental effort.
Totally. Yeah, when I work, not that it happens very frequently, but when I work with someone who is, not a current competing bodybuilder or powerlifter and they, want to lose weight, the first thing I go is, right, we're just going to track your data. We're just going to get some baseline values, teach them how to use MyFitnessPal, talking about how to use a food scale, talking about how to use a body weight scale, and go, if your food behavior changes because you're tracking, that's fine, but don't put a lot of effort into that. Let's just see what's happening. Come back to me with just 2 weeks of data. No big deal. And then we'll write your nutrition plan. And yeah, a lot of the times that doesn't occur. And that tells you well, it's a good thing I didn't write you a nutrition plan. That would have been a waste of time.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same with training too. I think I was talking to y'all in a meeting about how when people ask me, family members, old friends, whatever, right, they know that I coach bodybuilders and they're like, well, what do I do in the gym? I will definitely not write them a program. I will here's a website where they have some good programs. Pick one, do it for a month, let me know how you like it, and then we'll make one together. And 2 of the last maybe 30 times, someone actually followed one for a month, and again, it's not shaming them. It's just, as a coach and someone who loves this so much, when I'm writing one, that's a large chunk of my time and effort. And why would I do that if, again, not in a bad way, it just shows you, maybe I'm not ready for this life change right now. And that's okay. But again, it's a waste of everybody's time, really. And maybe that wakes them up, right? Oh, maybe I wasn't ready for this. And in 6 months after I finish school, we can try again or something. But, yeah.
Speaking of changes, though,
yeah.
Most of the people we do get are ready to hit the IIFYM thing hard, right? They're ready to track their 3 numbers. They're coming from a system that they're fuck, I can't see myself doing this for the rest of my life. I hear this might be better. And then they get involved with macronating. And I can think of a time where, literally, this is how I thought that, my 3 numbers, I can do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I remember talking with my friend Chris back in the day, and we're like, dude, we should make shirts with our macros on it, but that's just where we were. And then it gets to the point where this system gets old and you're looking for the next thing. And then sometimes there is people who, they're like, nah, I'm actually really happy doing what I'm doing. And me, having done that at some point, seeing the merit in that, and now I'm off doing something a little different now. I'm like, no, it gets a little better, dude. It gets a little better. You just got to make that jump. So I guess that last step 4 it was on that thing that JPS posted.
Adaptive intuitive eating, he calls it. Also, can you please take your hair off the mic? and you're great. Sorry, keep
How
going,
does that
keep
even
rolling.
happen? I think it's my T-shirt and it's this mic. But yeah, how do you guys get someone to go over into that direction? Because I feel that for most everyone that we do get going right into tracking numbers, not an issue. But the biggest issue is at some point when you're like, I think you're ready. I think you're ready for that next step. It's really hard to do.
Well,
I
I don't
mean,
think
from-
you have to necessarily, like, someone. I do think someone can have all of the benefits of that stage 4 with while still tracking macros, if that's what works for them. I think like Ian's probably a good example, you know. So it's not always necessary, but like I typically go with the approach. I often do it after prep because it's a really good time where it becomes very obvious whether or not that's an additional stressor to them. And for some people, it's both. Like tracking is how I knew I wasn't going to overeat and binge eat during prep, and now I'm still hungry, but I don't want to gain weight too fast. So I'm afraid if I stop tracking, I'll get too fat.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of need a system they're comfortable with, but at the same time, more often than not, they're really fucking tired of tracking, and they want more freedom because they're tired from prep. So it's a good time to go, right, don't worry, we've got this stepwise system, and we're still going to be tracking body weight, and we're still going to be tracking protein, and we're going to start just with protein and calories. So I don't really do it in like a stepwise fashion. I go, right, we're going to go to protein and calories. So hit protein within 10 grams, hit calories within 100. Don't worry about your carbs and fat ratio, and we'll be in a surplus anyway. And that can normally get past the fear, you know. And then once they see that works, then we go, okay, let's just try body weight, you know. And like, you're not going to drastically change your eating behavior after years of eating this way. Like, you're probably still going to eat protein in each meal, and our goal is to still get close to our macros, but we're not going to actually track it. I think you're going to do it anyway. So let's just track our body weight, and if there's a few things that you tend to let fall off the radar, like my personal example is I have to count my protein in my head just to make sure I don't get too low. Other people might be like servings of fruits and vegetables or whatever. Mm-hmm. Then I think moving towards it in a stepwise fashion is the way it's done. And I think people will actually become more habituated with those behaviors if the only thing if tracking is the only thing making you do the things you know you're supposed to do, you haven't habituated it. You know?
You're not ready yet.
Yeah.
I mean, the way, that's how, as a coach, I do it. The way you just recommended, Eric, because I know I've talked about the tiers a ton of times since the pyramid videos came out even. But for myself, the fear went away when I would test it either on purpose or because life events. So there was a time prep happened, and then I'd say for the next 6 months to a year, I would track, and then maybe it was an outing with Brandon and I went to Tahoe for the weekend or something, and then I wouldn't track, and I'd be like, oh shit, nothing happened. Okay, and then I get to tracking again, and then Brandon and I did this like 2-week-long vacation across the country, and in the first 4 or 5 days, I still tracked, and it was like I wasn't having a good time, and like we weren't able to stop certain places, and I was like, fuck it, I'm not going to track. And a week went by, and then I weighed myself, and I was like, oh god, nothing happened. And it took me like proving to myself that I guess I do kind of have a grasp on this, but if those things didn't happen, because there was a time too, right before when I was chronically dieting, where if I wouldn't track for a day, I was binging. You know what I mean? I would be like, I'm not going to track today, therefore we're going to IHOP, and then we're going to, and binging, by the way, for me would be like 2,000 calories instead of my 13. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Not even competing, but this is me trying to stay at 130 between seasons. You know what I mean? It would be shit like that where something would come up, some event, but I would order the shittiest thing on the menu because this is my one meal out. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it took me like a year or two after that last prep to get to the point where when I wouldn't track, I'd still pretty much eat the same and nothing would happen. But that just proves to me that I wasn't ready, back in like 2012, whereas I was like in 2015. But it was...
That's really normal.
Yeah.
I mean, that was, I remember experiencing that same thing. Like, tracking macros was the stranglehold I was barely able to keep on not getting fat, at least in my head. And I think Like that's totally normal during prep, especially at the end. That's totally normal during the kind of like the recovery phase after prep, and it can extend if you try to stay too lean. Like I think many of us have tried.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really common among competitors. So yeah, I mean, some of it just comes down to acceptance and realizing like, okay, maybe just because I competed at 5% doesn't mean I can walk around at 9 to 10% body fat all the time. Like I might actually have to be at wherever I have to be, you know.
Yeah.
But a lot of people just aren't ready to accept that. So they spend 5 years and fighting to not get too fat, basically, quote unquote, around too fat. And that's people who, when I post about kind of this process and just tracking body weight and just eating habitually without tracking macros, they're the people who you'll see respond, be like, oh, if I did that, I'd be 300 pounds in 2 weeks. And I go, well, I know you think that right now. It feels very real and you're not ready to do it yet, but
yeah,
that's probably not true.
I mean, but I just don't.
Or that's true because of what you're doing, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think it's just important to recognize that it won't be like the things I just talked about. I just talked about 2012 and 2006. Like, that was like 4 years. So it's not like one day I was like, don't need that shit anymore. You know, I'd still have that 2 week vacation, be like, oh my God, nothing happened. But I'd still be like a little stressed out. And so I just start counting again because it was easy. And like, it was to the point, and I think too, like right now, I still eat the same thing for dinner every night. Legit every night I'm home, which is like at least 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. I have the same, not every meal, but like, because I wake up at home and I go to bed at home or eat dinner home, those 2 meals are almost always exactly the same. And if they're not exactly the same, the tortilla with cookie butter might be rice cakes with cookie butter, like for my dessert, you know? But like, it's pretty much the same thing, right? And so, again,
there's a big difference between being a creature of habit and being someone who feels like they have to track macros or they'll be fat.
Yeah, but I'm saying is there was a point in time where like gradually I'd be like, all right, I know I'm going into dinner with about 500 calories left. I wouldn't need to go into my fitness pal and put it there just so I knew. Like, like there was just all these little baby steps along the way. Yeah. And I'll still 3 or 4, like I like checking in on what I'm eating though. Like I still, it's not like I never track now, but it's not like I have to in order to keep my body weight in check or my goals in check.
Right. Yeah. You know, I was, when we were talking about people who more gen pop and they want to, they tell you they want to do something. And then when you give them the first kind of thing, they don't do it. That really reminds me of the, the stages of motivation that people learn if they're personal trainers or coaches or whatever. And it goes, pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, and then action. There's like 3 phases before someone's actually acting. Yeah. And I think it's really normal for fitness professionals to hear from people when they're in the contemplation and the preparation phase. And I don't think that the people in those phases, especially the preparation phase, necessarily know that they're not ready to act. They're like gathering information, convincing themselves, figuring out, can I actually do this? And they have to reach a tipping point where they have enough self-efficacy and information to feel like they can do a plan and actually stick to it. Yeah. But a lot of them don't have the self-awareness or the experience to know that they're not actually really there yet, And like realistically, you can only help someone. Like I think about initial consultations as a personal trainer. Like if I could move someone from contemplation to preparation, that's still good, even though they're not ready to be a client, And hopefully you can move them from preparation to action. But a lot of people come in and they're trying to pay for you to become their action phase, and that just doesn't work.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it all we're talking about nutrition in this particular episode, but I think the same thing we talk about with all areas of fitness and life or whatever is approaching it like an experiment. Still is who gives a shit really what part of this you want to jump in on, but do whatever it is for like 4 to 8 weeks and track it. And what happened, and what did you and didn't you like about it, and did you stick to it, and what parts were hard, and and then just do it again, and do it again, and do it again. Like, it's just like running a training cycle. Again, that's how I approached everything up until, like, I got with Bert in my 2013 season. Like, the 3 years before it, when I was, like, by myself, like I said, found that shit, all that happened within, like, 1 week, and it's 3 or 4 years till I find Bert that I'm just, like, this crash course of journaling and trying and trying and trying and journaling and trying and trying. And just incrementally, no matter what it is, you'll get somewhere better, right? Every every time you look back 6 months. So, or you should be, right? And if you don't look substantially different, you know a lot of things don't work for you. It's the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, it's just it's all an experiment, not just nutrition and not just the training either, but the methods within those, right? And like Berto's saying, he wanted to put his macros on his shirt. I think that the first problem is that you're not going to do these experiments and find the right macros and like, holy shit, I maintained body weight at these macros this time. Those are my macros for life. Like, that's just recognizing that it's not like we did those experiments and I'm talking about it like it's in the past tense. I'm still doing that right now.
Yeah.
In my own way. So like coach had me doing lifts at night and a cardio or conditioning piece in the morning, and I wasn't doing good with that. So I switched them for a month, right? And right now my current experiment is like trying to decrease my protein a little bit and increase my sugary, carby shit before I go train, and it's doing a little better, right? Before that, the thing was like implementing Gatorade into my training sessions to try to get a little bit intracarb, because as y'all know, I'm like transitioning to an aerobic sport. So those are my experiments now. So I just, as a listener, it's never going to end, right? I'm sure you guys have the same thing right now with some things, right?
Yeah, I was reflecting while you were talking on how I actually feel like my diet is better now that I don't track macros as far as for my goals.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the time people will position this discussion of like getting to like this habitual eating phase as, well, it's a concession you make because you need to have balance. You know, like it's not as good as tracking macros. That would be optimal, of course, because you're tracking more variables.
Yeah.
But, you know, because you want to have sustainability and longevity and you want to, you know, be a good person with your relationships, you know, you ease up. And you know what, that's okay in the long run. And I actually don't agree with that. Like the amount of, like I used to get fat in the off season because I would rigidly stick to a set of macros. I'd be like, oh, it's 100 fat, 450 carbs, and 250 protein. And like on my off days, or just if I sat around playing video games all day, that was a massive surplus I didn't need, you know?
Yeah.
Right? And I was trying to probably gain weight just too quickly for my training age at the time. But anyway, like now, as I've probably shared on the podcast a few times, I was hanging around 205, and now I'm about 220, but I did that over like 2 years, you know?
Yeah.
And my body fat went up a little bit, but I'm still very comfortable with my body fat level, and I've put on a substantial amount of muscle and, you know, up my training volume as well, and don't have the stress of a PhD weighing me down anymore. But there's a lot of things that all go together there. But the way that I gained that weight was not by tracking, you know, meticulously my food. It was by going, right, I'm going to try to be more full at all my meals.
Yeah.
It was that simple. And recognizing that we have a homeostatic system to keep us eating an appropriate amount, and it's called hunger and satiety. Now, sure, highly palatable foods, you know, being extremely inactive and, you know, all the weirdness of modern society that doesn't really match with the way our, you know, the human developed, results in people being obese and that not working very well. But once you spend all this time going through these first three phases we talked about and going through all those little habitual changes and gradual learnings that you talked about, Andrea, it's like, now that I'm at this stage, I can bring hunger and fullness back in and also be aware of calories and everything. And then think about, oh, you know, if I didn't train today, and no wonder I'm not hungry, even though I've only eaten like 2,200 calories. So whatever, I'll just eat. Like, I don't need to force myself to put down 3,500 calories because that's my numbers.
Right.
So I think my deficit and my surplus, when I was gaining this 15 pounds or whatever over a year and a half, 2 years, I think my surplus was more appropriate on the whole, on a day-to-day basis than it would have been if I'd been like, right, I need to eat 3,500, and that'll put me at the right level of weight gain. It was more dynamic and probably closer to my actual needs on a day-to-day basis because I was incorporating my body signals, which I was previously. I mean, like, the whole ethos of being a bodybuilder is you ignore the signals from your body. You eat fuel for the machine, bro. I'll drink blood if it'll make me jacked. Like, you know, like, I'll eat 1,600 calories if I need to get shredded, and I did, you know, like whatever it took kind of thing. And so you force yourself to ignore hunger, you ignore fullness even, like in the off season when you're, you know, like I remember I remember me and Berto being in restaurants and force feeding in 2007 and 2008 when we first knew each other, and like being proud of that. Like, third trip to the salad bar, bro. You know,
because
like,
you're sacrificing the win. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing beyond hunger and satiety that I didn't think that I might, when I was doing like bodybuilding, powerlifting, might have been smarter for me to more pay attention to, but it wasn't as obvious as a problem to me then as it is now. And like the experiments I run, like I was talking about now with the Gatorade and now I'm not decreasing protein so I can keep calorie balance while carbs go up. It's that I was starting to feel, now that I do my cardio things in my PM session, right, all my jumping and running and whatever, I was feeling too heavy, like in my stomach. So I'm like, okay, rather than a jerky and a string cheese, I'm going to have some Apple Jacks. It's like that kind of stuff. And so that's what I'm playing with right now. And it's fun, and I read about it and whatever. And I know it's going to change. And I know that, and like you talked about too, what became really obvious was, even though I talked about when I wake up, I pretty much do the same thing. When I go to bed, I like kind of the same thing. During the day, depending on what sessions I have, or maybe I just have one, or maybe it's just an active recovery day or whatever, the middle of the day trend kind of changes a lot. And that's just, like you said, it's a habit of me. I know during the middle of the day, I'm probably going to consume between 1,000 and 1,500 calories. And do I have to run today? Because if I have to run or jump rope, I have to eat way less before I go. So I'll pick something really dense. And that's, again, the things that I learned in that rigid phase is like, okay, what is dense? What is not dense? And usually when you're dieting, it's what is like no calories for a shit ton of volume kind of thing. But those are all, like Jeff says, tools that you develop over time, and why that rigid phase is important. But it's not just hunger and satiety. That was its own like multi-year thing, and now it's like, okay, what makes me perform well at certain times of the day? What makes me not feel like shit? I took coffee out of my diet because I didn't want to poo during running, like stuff like that. You know, whereas like when I was weightlifting and like my heart rate wasn't super high, it didn't matter. But now I'm like, I really don't want to stop in the middle of running a mile, kind of thing. So I don't do morning coffee anymore. So it's all those little things. I developed an intolerance to oatmeal that I didn't know. Now I have oat bran. You know, Bert, what have you learned? You're just sitting here laughing at me, sort of.
I drink water now. I realize that I don't drink much water at all. Yeah, I think today was the first time I went through a full gallon, actually.
Congrats,
I had been trying for weeks now, and I just can't do it. And
I can't drink diet sodas anymore. At all. I can't.
I drink about 4 to 3 a day personally, but that's because I'm dieting, and that's gonna go away like really soon because it's expensive. But yeah, there's always little things that you're adding on, and when you look at, it's funny, like it's like you go back to where you started. I didn't track a single calorie for like 8 years, like when I first started doing all this, and all I really did was like eat healthy. Like I would eat, healthy foods many times during the day. My diet centered around protein. And it's funny because we're kind of there now, but if anything, what I got from my time as an macronator was that it's okay to eat a wide variety of food. Yeah. So I look at what I'm eating now, and I'm like, fuck, like if it wasn't for this and that, I don't think I'd be here now. Like there's so many things that I have in my fridge that had I not taken up weightlifting, taken up the culture as a whole, like that's my culture basically. And I think that's why I think I do pretty well in the off season when I'm not tracking, because it's just a way of life for me. It's like a meal without protein. That's just fucking weird to me.
Yeah.
Like, eat a banana and that's it. Like who rolls into work with a banana? See, I do that
now. I didn't do that for like 5 or 6 years. Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's crazy how you come full circle and you kind of end up back at the basics. And for the rest of your life, you just try to perfect all those basics. And it's funny because I was like tripping out like years back about what kind of dextrose I should have like intro workout.
I heard that waxing maize might be better for glycogen.
Oh, the wax.
I took the L-carnitine. I took the CLA. I did all that crazy shit. I just money, just like.
Andrea gets down hardcore when the crazy shit she's done is CLA.
But I mean, like, when I think about oh God, all the little tablets of stupid shit I used to take.
I used to spend so much fucking money on supplements.
I know, dude, me too. It was so bad.
I had a pill box like that.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Y'all weren't Herbalife, no. I have all the tablets. I don't even know.
I was a
Anyways.
Controlled Labs representative.
Oh, hey.
And Epic.
right.
I don't even think that company's around anymore. But
I
on
don't
in the forums in like 2004, 5, and 6, I was like supplement company rep. This is just like in my mind, the pyramid back in 2005 would have been a pyramid, and each star was equally important, and it would have been training, nutrition, supplementation.
Yeah.
Supplements are just as important as training.
Yeah, because if you can maximize it, why not? That's how I was thinking.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Except the fact that I was a poor ass college kid on loans buying hundreds of dollars a month. Like, who needs like rent, you know?
Not serious athletes.
I know. That's funny you said going back to the basics, right, Bert? Because that's my current problem now. Is like I'm thinking about when I was a gymnast training 4 hours a day. What did I eat? And it was not lots of animals. And I know that it's hard for me to not eat as much protein, but it's like making me feel better in my PM sessions. So that's my current.
And it's crazy because no one's good at the basics. Like nobody.
Yeah.
Like nobody. That kid that's asking you this, and that, and it's like, bro, like you don't even know how to curl, dude. Like, can we talk about that for a second? And the same thing goes with nutrition. Although the basics are a little different depending on who the person is, right, and their goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's maybe 15 to 17. There's this guy who follows me on Instagram, and he's made like 3 different accounts because each time I'm like, dude, you don't even pay attention to this. Stop asking me the same question. You don't need to do this. And he tries to pretend like he's someone else. And he asks me all these questions about DUP.
Oh my Lord.
Like, how do I progress my power day? And I thought that I couldn't use DUP, that linear progression was for intermediates, but how can they both be at the same time? And I don't know how to get through to him that he's doesn't even have a 2 in front of his age yet. He doesn't need to be worrying about his periodization. Like, just get a good split
go play
and train
football.
hard and progress.
Just go do something.
Yeah, just eat enough to gain weight slowly and make progress in the 6 to 12 rep range.
Yeah.
And then train the compound lifts.
Yeah. Or just go get
Stop
starting
bugging
strength
me.
and do that and go away. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't... It's hard when we have these conversations because I know that in the back of my head I'm always like, but the first part is that you have to know where you are. And it's so hard. It's so hard to know where you stand on the spectrum of beginner to, like Jeff Albert status or whatever, or Bryce or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Or Bert. But when it's...
No, not Bert. He's with Bliss.
Yeah. The placenta.
Placenta.
But you know what I mean? Like, so it all always boils down to that, like, hear all these things, but knowing where you fit. And I think just first off recognizing that there is always a spectrum. And not only that, like we do talk about this far advanced, you'll finally get to where you can do this stuff. But at the same time, I think we've done a good job illustrating that, but you're still forever going to be changing it. And you should if you care. And it's not just nutrition. It's also, like, again, the training. Shit as simple as, like, my schedule changed. Maybe I'm going to train at 4 p.m. instead of 4 a.m. Like, those are all the same thing. Or, you know what I mean? You have a kid, or your job is on this side of town now and it wasn't, so you have to go to this gym instead. Like, it's no different than any of that shit. It's just, it's never going to end. And I find comfort in the fact that it's never going to end, but I know those people want to they want to find their macros so they can have the shirt, But
Yeah. Instead, I realize it's an ongoing process of
yeah.
customization.
Yeah. The thing to talk about later becomes smaller as far as, like, the difference it makes, right? Whether I have a protein bar or Apple Jacks might not seem like a huge deal to some people, but if it makes me feel really... It's like a 15, 20% difference, but it matters to me. And I had to try it for it to, happen or whatever.
Yep.
Okay. Did we do a good job, or what else do we want to talk about?
That's why If It Fits Your Macros isn't perfect. The end.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. This has been the 3D Muscle Journey podcast with Alberto Nunez, Andrea Valdez, and Eric Helms.
Oh my God. Okay, we'll leave that part in.
Yeah.
Hey everybody, it's Eric Helms. Thanks for tuning into our podcast. As you know, at 3DMJ we promote evidence-based approaches to the lifting community. If that's something you want to dive deeper into, I'd encourage you to check out my research review, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport, or for short, MASS. This is a review that myself, Dr. Mike Zerdos, and Greg Knuckles put out every month. We cover the latest research publications that are applicable to strength and physique athletes, or anyone who's looking to get stronger or improve their body comp. Our content is in both written and video format. For more information on how to subscribe, check out 3dmusclejourney.com/mass. That's 3dmusclejourney.com/MASS for further details. Thanks for tuning in.